In this video, we explore the dark and chilling side of McDonald's. From late-night shifts to eerie encounters, these true horror stories will make you question whether you are ever truly alone at the Golden Arches. Stay tuned and prepare for the unexpected. In a quiet little town where the days are slow and the customers generally patient, I, an experienced McDonald's employee, was working the drive-thru. On this particular shift, I was tasked with teaching the basics of customer service to new trainees and handling customers. The drive-thru lane was relatively quiet. The first customer, an elderly gentleman, placed a simple order. When it came time to pay, he handed me a $10 bill and said it was for me, but I placed it in the donation box and bid him farewell with a warm smile. Next, the second customer was a woman who was frustrated with technology and had reached the limits of her patience. She yelled into the speaker that she needed 3 vanilla milkshakes. I informed her that the special offer for dollar milkshakes had ended. Her response was sharp and dismissive. "Yes, I know," she said pointedly. "I'll drive around if that's not a problem for you." When the woman reached the window and saw the price, $10.85, her anger escalated. She accused me of trying to cheat her. "How dare you charge me extra?" she yelled in rage. My manager stepped in to explain. "Ma'am, he processed your order correctly. The price is higher because the offer has expired." Despite our attempts to adjust her order, her anger did not subside. Accepting her modified order, she said, "Listen, I'll be direct. I'm not stupid like you people. If someone as foolish as you can make such a big mistake, they shouldn't have a job. You deserve a life fit for a princess, idiot." With that, she drove off. This experience left me disheartened, but my manager reassured me that I had done nothing wrong. His support helped me move past the irate customer's scolding. After the shift ended, as I was heading to the back of the store, I suddenly felt an eerie sensation. There was an old storage room that was rarely used. Inside, I saw an old fridge and some outdated items. The room had a strange chill that made me uneasy. As I ventured further into the room, I discovered an old packet containing some letters. Among the letters was one from a previous owner. It read, "There are some invisible forces within this store. We were instructed not to let anyone enter this storage room. Strange events have occurred here." After reading the letter, I realized that something unusual was happening in the back of the store. When I left the room, I felt an eerie presence surrounding me. Later that night, as I was leaving the store, I noticed some shadowy figures moving in the dim light. That evening, when I was alone, I secretly reviewed the store's security footage. In some old footage, I saw an invisible force moving around different parts of the store. Sometimes the camera would shake. Other times, strange objects seemed to be displaced. Determined to investigate further, I returned to the room the next day. I opened an old cabinet and found some ancient skulls and what looked like an old book. The book featured an ancient symbol stained with what appeared to be blood, which terrified me. The more I tried to learn, the more an eerie force seemed to envelop me. The following day, I told my manager everything. He seemed somewhat embarrassed, but reassured me that there were rumors about the previous owner, but nothing substantial. Nevertheless, he advised me to put it out of my mind for peace of mind. Finally, that night, as I prepared to enter the store, I noticed the lights flickering strangely. A cold breeze seemed to sweep around me, and I felt the presence of that invisible force. After that night, I was certain that there was some mysterious and unexplained power within the store. This experience reminded me that there may be invisible mysteries and forces we encounter every day without realizing it. In a small corner of a town in California, there stood an old McDonald's restaurant. The townsfolk often whispered about it. Some claimed that the place became the center of eerie occurrences at night. People would say, "If you're there alone at night, you never know what might happen." I was a new employee, just a week into the job, and my third night shift was about to begin, running from midnight to 6 a.m. That night, our manager Jenny left early, like she often did after closing. It was just me, Steve, and 2 other employees left in the restaurant. There wasn't much work, so after finishing up a few tasks, we sat around. But as the night grew darker, an unsettling tension began to creep into the air. There was an invisible chill, thickening around us. The first strange incident happened when I went to clean the restroom. The McDonald's restroom was located in the back of the restaurant, where the lighting was always dim. I had just started mopping when the lights began flickering. At first, I thought the bulbs were just going bad, but the next moment, they went out completely, leaving the room in darkness. Suddenly, I felt a cold sensation wash over me. It was as if someone or something was standing right behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. Then, the door started slowly closing, on its own. My eyes caught a glimpse of the mirror, and it looked like something was being written on it, as though invisible fingers were tracing letters. In moments, the message became clear. "You are not safe here." My heart raced. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pounded on it, trying desperately to get out, but it was as if the door was locked tight. Then I heard it, a faint whisper like someone speaking just beside me. The words were unclear, but it felt like they were saying, "You can't leave." Cold sweat formed on my forehead. Just as suddenly as it had shut, the door swung open and I bolted out of there. I ran straight to Steve and told him everything. His face went pale, but before he could respond, a loud metallic crash echoed from the kitchen. It sounded like something heavy had been thrown. We rushed to the kitchen, and what we saw made our blood run cold. The freezer door was wide open and food was scattered across the floor. At first, I thought maybe someone had forgotten to close it, but Steve pointed towards the freezer and said, "Look closer." I peered inside and froze. Standing in the back of the freezer was a shadowy figure. It looked human, but it wasn't. Its eyes were glowing red and its teeth were sharp, almost monstrous. I stumbled back, terrified, and the figure vanished into thin air. Steve whispered, "There used to be an employee here who got trapped in the kitchen one night and didn't make it. I think he's still here." We were preparing to run when the kitchen door slammed shut. The lights in the restaurant flickered on and off, plunging us into near darkness. The coldness around us intensified. Steve confessed that he had also experienced strange things before. One night around 3 a.m., when he was alone, he heard someone speaking behind him, but when he turned around, no one was there. He also once saw his own name, mysteriously written in a metal bowl in the kitchen. We were not alone. There was something in that restaurant with us, something unseen, something closing in. We raced toward the front door, only to find it locked. We couldn't get out. Then the whispering started again, coming from near the kitchen. "You're trapped here." The air around us seemed to tremble with a strange energy, as if something malevolent was lurking, waiting. We fought with the door, desperate, until finally it swung open. We sprinted out into the night. The next morning, when Jenny arrived, we told her everything, but she brushed it off. "You're just overworked," she said. "Your minds are playing tricks on you." But the look on her face told a different story. It seemed like she knew more than she was letting on. After that night, neither Steve nor I ever volunteered for the night shift again. We both knew that it wasn't just us in that restaurant. There was something else there, and whatever it wanted, it wasn't good. My name is Amy. I'm a 19-year-old girl from New York. When this incident happened, I was 17, and I worked at a McDonald's about an hour outside the city. After working there for about 2.5 years, I had gotten used to dealing with all kinds of weird and rude customers. But after that one day, my life changed forever. Our McDonald's was in a bit of a secluded area, and I usually worked the morning shift because I didn't like working at night. One day in mid-June, I was working my regular morning shift. It was around 7:30 in the morning when I first saw him. He looked to be around 35 years old, with messy hair and piercing blue eyes that hadn't seen soap or water in a few days. He wore a dark green leather jacket and reeked of cigarette smoke. He ordered a breakfast sandwich and a large coffee. As I was taking his order, he stepped so close that I could feel the grimy stench radiating from his body. When I reached out to give him his change, he suddenly grabbed my hand. A wave of terror surged through me, but I couldn't say a word. His yellowed teeth stretched into a creepy smile as he said, "You've got a beautiful smile, Amy." I froze in shock. I had never told him my name. How did he know? I quickly finished his order and turned my attention to the other customers, but I could still feel his gaze lingering on me. Once his food was ready, he left and I breathed a sigh of relief. But that relief didn't last long. The next day, at the same exact time, the same man returned. This time he stood even closer, getting more bold. Every day after that, he came in ordering the same thing, and each time he made increasingly uncomfortable small talk. He asked about my age, if I had a boyfriend, and even inquired about my work schedule. This went on for weeks. I reported it to my manager, but he brushed it off. "Just ignore the guy," he said. That's when I realized I was on my own. Then one day the man took it a step further. I was working in the lobby. Our McDonald's had a big lobby, and the bathrooms were located at the far end near an outside door to the parking lot. That day I was more nervous than usual because the man had come in again. There was a sinister glint in his eyes that made my skin crawl. As I went to clean the bathroom, I looked over my shoulder several times, but I didn't see him anymore. I thought maybe he'd left. But as I was finishing up and getting ready to leave, there he was, standing right in front of me. That same creepy smile was on his face, but now there was a strange excitement in his eyes. I backed toward the door, but before I could react, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm and dragging me inside. I tried to scream, but he clamped his hand over my mouth and pulled me into the bathroom. The door slammed shut and locked behind us, and that's when I knew I was trapped. He threw me to the ground, and my head slammed against the counter. The world started spinning, and I felt warm blood trickle down the side of my face. I screamed in terror, but he pressed harder on my mouth and started to undo his belt. Tears streamed down my face, and in that moment, I thought it was all over. But luckily, someone outside heard my screams. A man started banging on the door and shouting, "Open up!" The man attacking me was halfway out of his pants, but the pounding on the door startled him. Within seconds, the door was kicked open and the man rushed in, tackling my attacker to the ground. My attacker fell hard, and I collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. A woman ran over to help me up. After that, everything became a blur. The police arrived, my parents were called, and I was taken to the office. My manager was severely reprimanded for ignoring my repeated complaints, and the man was arrested and charged. I quit a few weeks later because I no longer felt safe there. Even now, just thinking about it makes my whole body tremble with fear. In the dining area of a McDonald's, an unusual experience unfolded one quiet night. As the bustling daytime crowd disappeared and darkness settled in, strange events began to unfold. This story is about a night when my colleague and I encountered unsettling forces and mysterious occurrences that we could hardly explain. It was during my time working at McDonald's, specifically in the dining area. What was bustling with customers during the day turned into something entirely different at night. As soon as daylight faded, the place seemed to be swallowed by darkness, shrouded in a ghostly ambiance. No matter how much time you spent in the dining area, the solitude of the night made everything unnervingly unsettling. One night, my colleague Jack and I were working late. It was around 1 a.m., the store was closed, and we were finishing up our tasks in the dining area, wiping down tables and rearranging chairs. Through the large glass windows of McDonald's, the street lights outside were visible. Suddenly, we heard a strange noise coming from one corner of the dining area. It sounded like someone slowly dragging a chair across the floor. At first, I thought Jack might be playing a prank, but when I looked over, Jack was on the other side of the room, completely unrelated to the sound. I glanced back at the corner where the noise had come from, but there was nothing there. The tables and chairs were in their usual places. I figured it must have been my imagination, so I didn't think much of it. A little while later, while I was wiping down a table, I felt an eerie sensation behind me, as if someone was standing there. Slowly, I turned around, but there was no one. Just then, a cold draft seemed to pass by me. Still wondering if I was imagining things, the noise came again from the same corner. This time, it was unmistakable. The chair was moving slowly. I saw the chair sliding across the floor, and it wasn't a trick of my eyes. The chair was definitely being dragged across the floor, yet there was no one around. I couldn't take it anymore and looked at Jack, who was now visibly frightened. He said, "You saw it too, right? The chairs in that corner are moving." I nodded in shock. We thought maybe that was the end of it. But just then, the TV in the dining area turned on by itself. The screen was just a black void with static noise, and within that static, a shape suddenly appeared. It looked like someone was watching us through the screen. The shape wasn't clear, but it was distinctly visible to us. We realized something was happening that we couldn't control. The lights began to flicker, and at the same moment, the static noise on the TV grew louder. The entire dining area seemed to be under some strange force. We didn't wait around any longer. We abandoned everything and bolted outside. As we took in the cold night air, we felt a sense of relief, but the terror from inside the restaurant lingered with us. We knew something was there in that dining area, but what exactly it was, we never found out.